As England make last-minute preparations to their World Cup campaign, much attention has switched to how Roy Hodgson's men will cope with the hot and humid conditions in Manaus for their first Group D game against Italy. To see what effect these conditions will have on the players, I've come to Lucazade Sports Condition Zone in Canary Wharf, where I'll be speaking to John Brewer about what the players can do to combat them.
It's the Lucazade Sport Condition Zone, an indoor five-a-side pitch which has been set up to mimic the environmental conditions that the England team will find in Manaus. The temperature is elevated through a combination of heaters pumping hot air into the room, and also a fine mist of water that increases the humidity. And by raising the temperature and raising the humidity, we can create conditions that will be very similar to those that the England team will find in Manaus. I think it's important to understand, first of all, that as soon as a player starts to play football, their body temperature or core temperature rises. Now, in normal conditions, that body temperature will plateau at a slightly elevated level and stay at that plateau when body heat that is generated equals heat that's lost. But when you have a high temperature and a high humidity, it's much harder for that heat to be lost. And so body temperature can start to rise and go even higher. And if it gets too high, that can become really quite dangerous and not only affect the performance of the players, but potentially affect their health as well. More likely is that you'll see people who become confused, they become nauseous, they become dizzy, and often they'll faint and their body will go into a horizontal position to try and ensure that they recover as quickly as possible. It's the body's defense mechanism. The evaporation of sweat from the skin into the environment causes heat energy to be lost from the body and temperature to drop. When you have a moist, humid environment, it's very hard for sweat to evaporate, so instead it drips off the body. And that dripping of sweat is inefficient in a way of losing heat. So the body then switches on its sweating mechanism even more, and more sweat is produced. So it's very easy and very quick for players to dehydrate. We've done studies at the University of Bedfordshire where we've seen that players will lose probably 2 to 3 litres of fluid every hour in these sorts of conditions. So the key message is to stay hydrated.
Now you've played in the Manaus conditions, what would your advice be to the England lads come Saturday?
Keep yourself hydrated, have a good carb diet through the week, as you're going to need that. Your legs are dead after half an hour.
The first 5 minutes is pretty hectic if you're not prepared for it. So you would struggle if you don't have water. Sweat loss is ridiculous, as you can see. But yeah, it's more mental.
Just describe to me like what the standard of football was like in there. Did you have to like change the way you played at all?
Oh, definitely. The way you play is just like more tactical. Well, because if you're chasing, you're losing more. You're getting more dehydrated. And over here, you can get drinks in a 90-minute game. It's not possible.
What part of your performance do you think it affected the most?
My just general stamina, and mentally I wasn't too bad, but my legs gave out. Just walking around literally nearly for the second half.
You're making poor passes, poor decisions, so if you're not in that right frame of mind, you will pay the consequences. Hopefully England don't.
So now we know what the conditions will be like in Manaus. The only thing left to find out is whether England can handle the heat. For all your World Cup news, visit ibtimes.co.uk.